The Korean peninsula juts out from the Asian mainland south between the Yellow Sea and the Sea of Japan. It stretches some 635 miles at its longest and is 150 miles across at its widest. The main islands of Japan lie just 120 miles away. In its mountainous backbone, the Taebaek Mountains, there are peaks above 8,000 feet. But Korea's strategic location gives it an importance far beyond its modest borders.
Korea is the tinderbox of Asia. Geographically, it draws in several major powers: Russia, China, and Japan. Korea sits right in the middle of that and right in the middle of major American interests.
Korea reclaimed its liberty in 1945 after 3 decades of harsh Japanese rule, with the defeat of Japan at the end of the Second World War. The Soviet Union, a last-minute entrant into the Pacific War, occupied the north of Korea, whilst the United States occupied the south. The demarcation line would become the 38th parallel, which divides the country roughly in half. The Cairo and Potsdam conferences of the Allied powers of World War II had agreed to make Korea free and independent, but this was easier said than done. For the next 3 years, as the Cold War between East and West heated up, there were fruitless negotiations between Soviets and Americans to unify the country.
We both left behind surrogate militaries. Both of them led by people who wanted to see the peninsula united, as did the Korean people as a whole, but under whose tutelage?
When nationwide elections proposed by the UN were boycotted by the North, the South voted alone. The Republic of Korea was established in August 1948 with the complex Syngman Rhee as its president.
He spoke English. He had been educated at Princeton. He was known to Americans. He was very ambitious. He was very ruthless. And I think he was sort of the obvious figure on the landscape we had to deal with.
In September, the North established the Democratic People's Republic, with Kim Il-sung, a heroic leader of the anti-Japanese resistance, as its premier.
He had great charm, he had great ruthlessness, and he was a tremendously adroit politician. As a CIA officer, I was working against North Korea for years, and it was very interesting for us to watch him balance his Soviet and Chinese allies. He would never get sucked irretrievably into the orbit of either one.
Building on the desire of all the Korean people for a unified nation, both Syngman Rhee and Kim Il-sung were dangerously belligerent and threatened to attack one another in a war for total conquest of the peninsula. To the United States, Rhee seemed most likely to launch hostilities and upset the hard-won balance of power in the Far East. The Americans proceeded to make a major mistake.
The United States deliberately refused to give South Korea any weapons that would stop a tank. And they did this because they were afraid Syngman Rhee would attack the North if he had any weapons that could do any real damage to the North. And for that reason, the South Korean Army did not have any weapons whatsoever to stop the North Korean tank attack.
The Soviets had no such compunctions. They supplied North Korea with an arsenal of 150 first-line tanks, of which the South had none. And they supplied heavy-caliber artillery pieces that hugely outnumbered, outgunned, and outranged the South Korean weapons. Throughout 1949, Kim Il-sung pleaded with Stalin for permission to invade the South and unify the peninsula under communist rule.